Hi everyone and welcome back. It's Mindy with Mindy Egan Design, and today I have two cards to share with you, and I'm going to be doing some split stamping. So I'm going to use the same stamp to make two cards for this. I'll be using the Simon Says Stamp Beautiful Flowers stamp set. This was out of one of their card kits, which is sold out, and you can buy this stamp set separately. Just make sure to click the notify button so that when it is back in stock, you will be notified immediately and can go snag that up. So what I'm doing, since this is a really large stamp, I'm using the Misty tool and I'm going to stamp most of it onto this white piece of Neenah Solar cardstock. This is 80 pound. And since I am going to be doing some Copic coloring, I'm using some Simon Says Stamp black ink. This is a Copic friendly ink, so it's not going to bleed with my Copic markers. And I do go in with it twice. That's why I like to use my Misty, is I can go in and really darken up my impression of my stamp. This is a very detailed stamp, so I make sure I want to kind of give it a little CPR to make sure that I have all of those lines on my cardstock, and then I can go ahead and clean my stamp set off. Now, because it did overhang, and I actually am using the Misty mouse pad, it can be difficult to wipe up ink sometimes. So I did come in with a baby wipe. That didn't quite clean it all off, so I spritzed it with some Simon Says Stamp cleaner and wiped that off, but it can be oily. So what I didn't show in the video was that I did come back in with a baby wipe and dry that off really good with a paper towel, so none of that grease kind of carries into my project. So now I'm going to come in with my Copic markers and start coloring this up. I did leave just the beginning part of this here in real time, so this is the speed that I color. And I'm starting out with my darkest marker, which is the YR23. I decided to use some yellows for my flowers. I don't use yellow very often, so I thought that would be a nice change up, a really nice bright floral card. So I go in and I'm following the artist drawn lines. So I did that with my darkest marker, and then I'm going to blend this out from darkest to lightest. So I'll do the Y15, Y11, and Y00, and I'm just continuing those lines going out further, blending those out. And I do add a little bit of shadow when there is a petal sitting in front of another, so it can give a little bit of dimension. And I'm going to continue coloring this way for all of the flowers. I do break these down, since there are a lot of petals here. I do break it down into kind of sections per flower, so that way I kind of don't get messed up where I already blended out some areas and where I didn't. So I'm just starting with that first and foremost flower in the middle, starting in the middle section and working my way out. And like I said, anytime there is a petal sitting in front of another, I'm going to add some darker shading to the edge of that, just so that it can break it up and just give that flower some nice dimension. I do color my images twice. That's just my personal preference when it comes to the Copic coloring. And plus, using Neenah Solar cardstock, it does soak up the ink. So you can go through more ink versus using maybe some Express It. This is just my personal preference. I really enjoy how the color soaks into the cardstock, and also it's going to match, since I can buy this in a reasonable price in bulk. It's going to match anything else I use in white on my card. So that's another reason why I chose to use Neenah. And so while that is going, and you can see how I'm coloring, like I said, I'm just doing little flicks now around the edges where those artist drawn lines are. Definitely take advantage of that when they are there. Those are just kind of to help you break that up. So I hope I'm sounding a little bit better. I think the last few videos, if you've caught them of mine, I've been sick. And I'm still kind of battling a little bit of a stuffed up nose, but definitely not like I was. I'm finally kind of coming out of it, the tail end of it. Was able to get some rest, and then we had Memorial Weekend that we celebrated here, and we literally just hung out. We didn't go anywhere. We just kind of hung out as a family, didn't do much. We have a pool that we set up in the backyard, and it's a decent size. I'm not exactly sure how big, but it's a decent size, and we literally will spend all summer in that pool. My kids are fishes. They love it, especially my son. He would stay out there the entire day if I let him. Actually, I think one of the days I posted on my Instagram story, he wanted to go out at 9 o'clock in the morning. So there we are, swimming. Well, he is at 9 o'clock in the morning. I don't get in it very often anyway. But you know, my daughter and my son go in there quite a bit, and they just swim around and play in the inner tubes. And I just kind of sit back and enjoy the sunshine and watching them have a ball. It was extremely hot where I live this last weekend. And that's what's funny about living in Wisconsin is, you know, a month ago we were in freezing temperatures and closing schools for snow. And here we are Memorial Weekend and we were just roasting to death, which I'm not going to complain because I love summer. I love warmth. But it was pretty toasty. I think we were in the high 90s this last weekend, most of it. So it was pretty warm. And then last night we had quite a lightning storm. My daughter admitted this morning that she actually sat up past her bedtime to watch the lightning. So it can be beautiful when it's not causing any damage. We did have some some branches that fell. But other than that, we didn't have any damage done, thankfully. It was just a good rain, cool things off a little bit, and I'm sure my kids will be back out in the pool this afternoon. So that was kind of our weekend, just chilling out, not doing much. I hope you guys enjoyed it, had a good weekend, did some cookouts or hung with friends. My daughter actually did go, I think it was actually yesterday, so I think it was on Monday. Daddy took her and her friends over to a volleyball court. And so they went in the 90-degree heat to play volleyball, but then come to find out they actually were jumping in the river more than they were playing volleyball because there's a river that runs past the courts off on the side. And so they would go down, jump in when they're hot and come back up. But the girls were having way too much fun. And I love that, for one, Daddy is so active when it comes to working with my daughter when it comes to, or our daughter when it comes to volleyball, because she loves playing volleyball. And, you know, he's kind of a cool dad. He's the fun one, takes them to get ice cream when they're all done. But I love the memories that my daughter is making. She may not realize it yet, but I see it. The memories and the bonds that she's forming with these girls, you know, they're not typically girls that she hangs out with in school, most of them. I mean, they'll talk and they're friends, but the volleyball, they have just a complete passion for volleyball. And I love all these memories that they're making together, whether it's just at the drop of a hat, they're running off to go play volleyball, or in our backyard, or down to the volleyball courts where my husband plays volleyball. So that's something kind of random to share, but I totally enjoy watching. And I would go down and watch or just have fun. But Dalton, my son, who's autistic, one of the things is he is not good in heat. He never has been. He always got hot really fast, and he gets really worn out really fast. And plus, he's a large kid. He's a very large kid. Thankfully, he has Daddy's height, so that does help trim things down a little bit. But to give you an idea, the kid is going to be finishing up first grade here. He's over 100 pounds, and that's pretty big. But like I said, thankfully, you know, he is stretched out. He's the tallest in his class, but he weighs more than my 12-year-old, which is kind of nuts, you know. And it's those things though that you just have to deal with when it comes to kids, especially with autism, because they have food issues, and Dalton definitely has some food issues, food sensitivities. So that doesn't help our situation any. So, you know, a lot of activity, but heat, it's really hard, especially during the summer. That's why the pool is so great, because he can go out there, he's active in the pool, and it keeps him cooled off a little bit. So summer should be pretty interesting and pretty fun. So you can see here, as I've been babbling, I've been coloring this in, and I didn't speed this up as fast as I normally would, just because if you really wanted to follow along and really get a good look at how I've been coloring this flower, I slowed that down enough for you. And like I said, I always went over them twice, and I like to go in and deepen those shadow areas to really make the image pop. So I'll be getting this finished up. And I brought in a little bit of the dark colors from the top too. Wherever the artist drawn lines were is really where I added the shadows. I didn't take too much liberty on my own with adding stuff, adding those shadow areas. I really just followed what the artist had provided there. And I'm just finishing up this rosebud off on the side. And then I can come in and do the leaves, is what I'll be doing here shortly. So now while I'm getting that finished up, with this type of design, the split card, I'll be cutting this image. And some people I know like to cut it first and then color. I opted to leave it as a whole. I thought that was easier for me to just leave this as an entire whole, and I'll cut it when I'm all done. Now for the leaves, I'm coming in with that really light color, which is the YG. I think I started with the 21. And then I'll go in and bring in the dark color, which is the YG 67. And I just blended out from the middle. I didn't worry too much about exact shadow areas. You know, if a flower was leaning over it or casting a shadow, I just literally went to the middle of the leaves, added that darkest color, and then blended out from darkest to lightest. And I will have all of my Copic markers that I used listed on my blog and down in the supplies section as well, along with any other supplies that I'm using today. But for the leaves, I just kept it really straight and simple, and I really liked this green combination. I thought this worked out really well. It's really hard for me sometimes, honestly, to use yellow and greens together, even when it's flowers, because I live in Wisconsin, and Wisconsin is Green Bay Packers, and their colors are green and gold. Even though I do not really follow football, it's just embedded in my head, green and gold. So it's really hard for me to color yellow flowers with the green leaves, but I did it. I was really proud of myself, and I think this stamp is just a gorgeous stamp that would look great in any color. Yellow was just something I just happened to be experimenting with. And some of these leaves do have quite a bit of detailed stamping in them, so you don't even really need to color it that much. You just add in some darker areas, and I really kind of focused on having that highlight peek through so that it did show some sort of color and didn't get lost in the white background. So there I'm just adding little flicks away from the center, and I'm following the line of the leaves so that it doesn't look like I'm going in different directions, and blending that out with the darkest to lightest. And same thing, just adding those flicks, blending that out from the center, working my way out and leaving room for the highlight area. So while I'm getting this finished off, I'll give you a little base of what I had done here. I had actually already done some heat embossing, and I didn't like the color of cardstock that I had chosen, so I needed to redo that. So here I have some yellow cardstock. I believe this is Sunflower. And when I originally did this, I had left the flower stamp on my Misty so that they were stamped in the exact same position for both the white piece of cardstock and my a previous color that I had used. Well, obviously I cleaned my stamp off. I removed it from the Misty. So I need to make sure that this stamp is lined up in the exact same place. So I had already cut my floral image that I just Copic colored. I'm laying that top layer down onto the cardstock that I'm going to do this on, and I'm matching up. This is another beauty of using a Misty stamping tool, is I can match up where that stamp is. So this is going to be stamped in the exact same place on that sunflower cardstock. Then I can pick that up with my Misty tool, remove my white piece of cardstock. And then I'm prepping this with an anti-static powder tool so I don't get embossing powder where I don't want it. I'm going to ink this up with some clear embossing ink and push down really good here. I also have just a little bit of adhesive on here to hold everything down. And then I can sprinkle in some, this is Hero Art's clear embossing powder. Now, when I had done this, even just leaving this card front as heat embossed with clear, it's beautiful because it really kind of pops off of that yellow cardstock, kind of giving it the tone. Look at that. It's just really gorgeous how that comes out. While I have my Misty stamping tool out, I'm going to go ahead and do a sentiment. So I have a black piece of cardstock, that I had just done with the anti-static powder tool to remove any of that excess oils and static. And this is one of my favorite go-to stamping sets. This is Kind Flowers. I use this thing way more than I even realized. There's just some really great simple sentiments on here. I love making thank you cards. You can always have thank you cards on hand. So the one I had picked is Your Kindness is Appreciated. So I just laid that down, picked it up with my door, and inked that up with the clear embossing powder. And I'm just shifting my cardstock down a little bit so I can stamp this again, because they're going to be cut down into some really thin strips. So I didn't need to move my stamp, I just moved my cardstock. And now I'm going to be using the Simon Says Stamp white embossing powder. I just love how the white embossing powder looks on black. And there were a couple speckles on there of powder I didn't want, so I'm just kind of brushing that lightly away with a paintbrush. Get that all cleaned off. And then I can heat that up with my embossing tool. Now typically when I would be doing this, I would cut the white and the colored heat embossed cardstock at the same time so that all my pieces are the same size. But like I said, this I kind of had to redo that other piece. So I'm just taking out my paper trimmer and making sure what size that top panel is and making sure that I can cut my colored cardstock to that same size. So that way my flowers are going to be continuous when I start to mix the white cardstock with the yellow cardstock. So you'll see here in just a second how I'll get that lined up. But I just had to measure that out, make sure they were all the same size. And I'm going to go ahead and trim these into some tiny strips. Now I do like using this Fiskars paper trimmer with that metal bar. It just seems easier for me when I'm trying to figure out where my blade is actually going to cut. So right at the edge of that bar is where my cut line is going to be. For some reason, I just have an issue doing it with my guillotine trimmer. I do like that for small cuts, but this just seemed to work out better for me. I could line that up and get that into a really tiny strip. So now I have those already. So here I'm going to start laying out. These are the two pieces, and I'm just going to flip the bottom piece for each. Now you want to make sure, big tip here, make sure your flowers are lining up. So you can see, and I didn't notice this until I was actually doing my blog post for this card, is that I didn't line up my flowers right. This first one I'm doing here, where it's got the white panel, and then I'm going to add the black strip, and then I'll have the yellow panel. Those match up continuous, but my other card does not. No big deal. I'm not going to worry about it. I think it still looks gorgeous. So this is just giving me an idea where I want to put my sentiment die. And I have an A2 size card base that I had attached the white panel to. I'm going to go ahead and use the Simon Says Stamp Tacky Glue to add my thin strip. I'm not worried about any overhang because I'm going to trim all of that off. So that's what I'm going to do for this yellow panel that I'm adding to the top. It's going to overhang. So instead of me measuring everything out, I'm just attaching that right above that black strip, and then I'm going to cut off the excess. So here is the yellow panel. I thought I matched that up. I didn't. Oh well. Same thing, adding that strip with the Simon Says Stamp Tacky Glue. So that's just a nice, it's a liquid glue. It has a really nice fine tip on it. So I've been really enjoying using that. And then adding the white panel on the top. Now I don't know if you noticed it right off, but my flowers are not matching up. They should look like a continuous. So it'll give you the whole stamp set the way it was supposed to, but I didn't. You'll have that. I really don't even know if anybody else is going to notice unless I tell them. Did you notice? I didn't notice until I was doing my blog post. So you'll have that. So I'm just trimming off the excess here with the guillotine trimmer so that it'll be a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch card. And there I have 2 cards that I got from this gorgeous stamp set. And now I'm going to come in and I'm doing a thanks for the top of my card. I thought silver was just a really nice, a glittery silver, I should say, was a really nice added sparkle to the card. And I'm cutting 2 of them. I didn't add any more dimension to this just because I thought the card was busy enough. I thought the simple thanks would be great. And this is the painted thanks die from Simon Says Stamps. So I added the thanks to the yellow panel. And I would have added it in the same spot on my other card, but it just looked too busy. I thought it kind of got lost in there. So I'm adding it to the bottom corner, and I thought that worked out really well. So I'm really happy with how these cards turned out. Even though I didn't match up one of my flowers, I still think both of these cards are really awesome. Turned out great, and it's a great way to use this big floral stamp. You could be doing them with colored pencils. I would love to try these with my water brush pens, would be another fun one. And I just finished off by adding my thanks die cut with that tacky glue again, that with a really great hold. So that is going to finish up the card video. I hope you enjoyed everything. If you did, I would really appreciate a big thumbs up for my cards, and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already done so. Thank you so much for stopping by, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.